As we continue our series on living the liturgical year in pandemic times, the next season, of course, is Christmas. Most of you have already begun planning your Christmas celebrations, either in church, doing it online or with limited attendance, or at home. In fact, most people have already put up their Christmas tree and their nativity scenes, so this video may seem a little bit late. But I wanted to provide this opportunity for us to reflect on some of these larger symbols about celebrating Christmas in the home, namely the tree and the nativity scene, and tie that together with the origins of the festival of Christmas. Later videos in this section of the series will look at other parts in the 12 days of Christmas. But first, let's take a look at this thing that we have underneath our tree, and it's been a custom in our family to put the nativity scene under the tree. This nativity scene is very familiar. No matter what the figurines look like, you have pretty much the same characters involved. Mary, Joseph, the baby Jesus, the three magi, an angel, a random shepherd, and various animals representing Jesus' birth in a manger, which was a feed trough. But if you take a look in the New Testament itself, namely Matthew and Luke's Gospels, you will not find this scene all together. In fact, you'll find it in various pieces. For example, Mary, Joseph, and Jesus feature prominently at the beginning of Luke 2, because it is Mary and Joseph who travel to Bethlehem, and that is where Jesus is born. Jesus is born in a manger. The shepherd doesn't show up until later, but only after the angel and the whole host of angels have told the shepherds to go and see where the baby Jesus was. Most likely those animals would have been there. We know that Mary and Joseph had to travel, so Mary probably traveled on a donkey. Certainly, if this is a feed trough or a place where the animals would be in the house, you would have other animals involved. But it's with these three over here, the Magi, or the wise kings, or the wise ones, wise men, however you want to translate that appear in an entirely different gospel. They are in Matthew's gospel. And they come to Jesus not at his birth, but much later, because we know, based on Herod's concern around the children age 2 and under, that Jesus was a little bit older when they showed up. And we'll deal more with the Magi when we talk about Epiphany. So where did all the characters come together? Why are they together when we don't see them together in the Gospels? Well, the most historic place is probably in the 12th or 13th century, around the time of St. Francis of Assisi and the devotion to the Nativity, devotional plays and other things that bring all the elements of Christmas together. But there is a text in early Christianity that does do the same thing, known as the Proto-Gospel of James, or the Proto-Evangelion of James. And this was a popular 2nd century text by Christians. Didn't make it into the Bible, but it primarily details the life of Mary prior to her becoming the mother of Jesus. But it also takes the texts of Luke's Gospel and Matthew's Gospel and puts them together. In here we hear about the humble birth of Jesus, where it's more of in a cave and the outskirts rather than a manger in the home. Here we're introduced to the woman Salome, who was tasked by Joseph to help with the birth, although the birth happened before she got there. And it's in the next chapter in the proto-gospel that we see the Magi showing up. So we already have in the 2nd century, when there are texts about the life and the birth of Jesus, bringing together all of the characters of the nativity scene as we see them today. So why December 25th, the traditional dating of Christmas? We've all heard that social, scientific, historical evidence tells us that shepherds would not have been out in the fields keeping watch over their flocks by night in the dead of winter, that it would have probably happened in the springtime. So why did the early church settle on December 25th? Well, December 25th was already established as a festival prior to the Council of Nicaea in 325. December 25th was the date of the solstice, the longest night of the year, which was moved into December 21st at the Council of Nicaea. But there have been two theories over the years as to why Christians chose December 25th. The most popular theory is referred to as the history of religions hypothesis. And this idea is that early Christians decided to take over a Roman pagan holiday, the holiday of Sol Invictus, of the invincible sun, the birth of the invincible sun, and instead make it the birth of the Son of God, as a way of Christianizing this holiday, as a way to win converts. Well, the interesting thing is that by the time we have December 25th as Christmas Day, Sol Invictus as a pagan holiday had only existed for 100 years. So it's questionable on how effective it would be for early Christians to do that. Another hypothesis is known as the calculation hypothesis, and this derives from the ancient understanding that perfect people lived a perfect number of years. So a perfect person would die on the same day of the year that they were born, of course, on different years. Well, Christians early on were already able to determine, at least they thought, the date of Jesus' own death, which was dated into the Jewish calendar of 14 Nisan, the lunar calendar, which would be March 25th. And so you're thinking, well, if it's a perfect number of years, then wouldn't Christmas also be on March 25th? Yes, following that ancient custom, that would make sense. The calculation hypothesis adds another caveat to that and said, well, early Christians, instead of dating it to Jesus' birth, dated it to his conception. So if Jesus died on March 25th, that means his conception was March 25th. And early Christians knew that from conception to birth was 9 months, and so you end up with Christmas 9 months later on December 25th. This hypothesis has problems because that whole dating of death to conception rather than death to birth really doesn't exist elsewhere. But this may be more of a theological connection to connect the fact that Jesus was conceived, the Annunciation happens at the same time as his death, connecting the beginnings of Luke's gospel to the end of Luke's gospel. In terms of the liturgical year, December 25th as Christmas is considered a late festival because we do not see evidence of it until the 4th century. But it makes sense that early Christians would be concerned about the birth, the incarnation of Jesus in the 4th century, because that is when Christianity starts solidifying some of its doctrines, including the establishment of the Nicene Creed and the other early church councils trying to say what it means to be Christian and what Christian theology is. And one of the biggest parts of that was Christology. Who is Jesus? And so it makes sense that a festival that describes and commemorates the origins of Jesus would be an important part of this century. Our earliest noting of December 25th as Christmas appears in 354, possibly as early as 336, where Christmas, December 25th, Jesus' birth, is included with a list of martyrs. And so this martyr list included people's names and the day of the year on which their heavenly birthday or their death date occurred. Jesus becomes the anomaly because it's not his death day that is listed, but it is his birthday. This Roman celebration of Christmas, it featured in the area of Rome, spreads first to North Africa in the 360s, and then will go into the East in Constantinople and celebrated among the Cappadocian Fathers around 380 to 381. Another staple in most households during Christmas time is the Christmas tree, and here's our tree here. Next to it is the parole, which you may recognize from the previous video on Living the Liturgical Year, Advent number 4. The origin of the Christmas tree has multiple layers. It has pre-Christian origins, so Northern Europeans would bring in evergreen, either trees or garland or boughs, into the house during the dead of winter, as a reminder of the life force of nature that would continue even while everything looked dead outside. The connections with Christmas is somewhat uncertain, but some of the stories include that the tree was brought in to churches as a way of depicting the creation story during a telling of the various biblical stories at Christmas time. And so the tree would be the tree of the knowledge of good and evil that we hear in Genesis. So the traditional fruit, although historically inaccurate, fruit of the apple may be the ideal ornament for your Christmas tree. Another origin, at least in terms of the lights, and of course pre-electricity, these were candles, very dangerous, was that Luther himself was looking through an evergreen tree during winter to the sky and saw the twinkling of the star and the other celestial bodies as they came through the tree, and got the idea that the tree should be illumined. But like the Advent wreath, bringing the Christmas tree and decorating it like this is a more recent phenomenon, but it is one that has also made its way into churches. One way to connect the Christmas tree in your house to the trees that may happen in your church if you're watching it online, pre-recorded or via Zoom, is with the ornaments. And so every year our congregation would give us an ornament. And we have about 4 of them on this tree from over the years that have the name of the church on it. And as we watch Christmas live streamed and we sit here and with the tree, we can feel that connection between the ornament on our tree and the trees at church. Other ways may be to recall the connection of wood, that you have the wood of the Christmas tree, not only as a recognition of the wood that would have made the manger, the feed trough for the animals at Christmas, but also the wood that makes the cross. And so as a way to connect Christmas and Easter, and to see the tree beyond just the glitz and the ornaments, but as part of creation, part of God's good creation. Ephraim, one of the great 4th century East Syrian hymn writers, sometimes called the Harp of the Spirit, composed many hymns on various periods of the church year. And in his hymn number 23, he gives us a sense of the connection of the entire liturgical year, beginning with the birth of Christ. Blessed is your birth that stirred up the universe. Too small for you is the earth's lap, but large enough for you is Mary's lap. He dwelt in a lap, and he healed by the hem of his garment. He was wrapped in swaddling clothes in baseness, but they offered him gifts. He put on the garments of you, and helps emerged from them. He put on the water of baptism, and rays flashed out from it. With his humiliation came his exaltations. Blessed is he who joins his glory to his suffering. Great one who became a baby, by your birth again you begot me. Pure one who was baptized, let your washing wash us of impurity. Living one who was embalmed, let us obtain life by your death. In his own sermon on Christmas Eve, Martin Luther describes the importance of Christ's birth as part of that happy exchange, the exchange between Christ and the believer. To us, born to us and given to us. Therefore see to it that you derive from the gospel not only enjoyment of the story as such, for that does not last long, nor should you derive from it only an example, for that does not hold up without faith. But see to it that you make Christ's birth your own, and that you make an exchange with him, so that you rid yourself of your birth and receive instead his. This happens if you have this faith. By this token you sit assuredly in the Virgin Mary's lap and are her dear child. This faith you have to practice and to pray for as long as you live. You can never strengthen it enough. That is our foundation and our inheritance. On it, the good works are to be built.